You are listening to the Super Freak Media Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, please be sure to show your support and follow us on our other social media platforms. Check out the links listed in the description of this episode to find out more. Thank you.
Only in recent years have we seen mouthy, slutty people who are still decent people and survive in the horror film. That used to not be the case. Oh, you're a slut? You're gonna die now.
That's the soundbite for this episode. Absolutely.
Hello and welcome to the They're Queer podcast, the podcast where two homos called Liam delve into the world of horror and look for the twinkly, gay, sparkly bits. We have a very special episode this week. Before we delve into that, as you know, my name is Liam J. And you are?
I am Liam B. I'm here as well.
Here I am. Here we are. Yes!
Yeah, welcome to the podcast this month. This is a very special month. It's Women in Horror Month. So we thought we'd do something amazing and get our first full co-host onto the podcast. So without further ado, we have the wonderful Mariam Draeger on the podcast.
Hello.
How are you?
I am fantastic. I have you two guys in front of me. Could it be any better? I mean, maybe, yes. But that is not what I'm here to talk about.
Could have Henry Cavill in here as well.
Yes, Daddy!
Yeah.
It's under my table, though.
Oh, wow.
See, it started already. This podcast is going downhill already. Jeez Louise.
Oh, keep the standard going. I love it.
Absolutely. If the bar's so low when we begin, then where can we go? Only up from here. But thank you so much for hopping onto the podcast. I know that you're an incredibly busy woman, and I've been meaning to catch up with you for ages. It's been a while, I think, since we last spoke. I think, was it back in 2020 it would have been?
Yeah. Funny, yeah.
Yeah, so...
perfect year to meet each other.
Yeah, literally mid-COVID pandemic. We got together and we did a bit of an interview for the Dead of Night Film Festival, which was cool. And I've been keeping up with you ever since. So we had a bit of a chat before the podcast started, and I want to make sure that we get your introduction right, because you are a woman of many talents, and your title, as you've told us, is cross-media horror producer. So what exactly does that involve?
Well, it means that I'm, as a producer, responsible for many things, but mostly making sure an idea turns into an actual project and everything that belongs to that. But rather than focusing on one form of media and having the occasional horror project, I've told myself, well, horror storytelling is not just something I'm passionate about, but it's very specific. It's got its own community, it's got its own stories, it's got its own stylistic means. So I've specialized in the genre, and therefore I work with different forms of media, whether it's film, series, video games, literature, theater, or holograms, 3D mapping.
The list goes on.
The list goes on. If it's a way to consume it, I'm sure I'll figure out a way to make it part of the marketing strategy of an IP.
Amazing.
I have to start off by being a little fanboy. Because I discovered Mariam through the Grim Exchange on Grimfest TV on YouTube, which is an incredible series. And if anyone's listening, please go and watch it. What you've created over there is it's quite game changing, because it's not something that I feel like we've really had before. So to be able to have like this great news show that also goes a bit deeper than just like surface level news is absolutely incredible. And it's a real love story to horror, which I just love.
No, that means a lot. Everyone who works on it is so in love with horror, and we are all interested in different subgenres. So we don't all like the same stuff, but we all love the genre as a whole. And like you said, it's not just surface level. The episodes are quite meaty. They're quite long. They take a while to research, but we wanted to create something that we as audience members would enjoy watching. And if that comes across, that's perfect. I mean, we definitely need to get you guys on as guest hosts on,
I would love that.
Love that. It's been recorded, so you've officially asked us now. We're not going to let you forget about that. No, it's absolutely right what you said. I mean, you can tell it's made by fans for the fans. And I think when we first spoke and got to know each other, it was something you were talking about. It was starting up, and it's just amazing to see what it's kind of bloomed into. I think it's really good. I know you're a big fan, aren't you, Liam? So
in preparation, when Liam told me that you were coming on, I was like, quite excited. So I've gone back and I've rewatched every single episode, and I'm yeah. So if you do get a little bit of ad revenue, you are welcome. But we were having a quick chat before this, and there's an episode in particular, the well-being and horror episode, which I found it was quite mind-blowing to me, because it's not really, even though I do use horror myself as an escape, it's not something I've really thought about quite deeply. And the way that you explored it was just incredible, because you didn't make it, even though it was quite theoretical, it was easy to digest, which is what I need. I need good things given to me and quite simply. So yeah, that's
well, the thing is, when it comes to horror and mental health, there are two directions that are really important to consider. First of all, the correct consumption of horror. I always say not every horror film is for every horror fan. Not every horror fan can watch every film on any given day. You know, how are we feeling that day? What are we up to? What are we used to? What's it like in a group? Is there peer pressure? Are we being insensitive? Does someone have personal experiences that make horror films maybe difficult? A particular one may be difficult for them to watch. There are studies out there that show that if you are in the right mindset, it's extremely good for your psychology and for your mental health. But if you're not, a horror film can have similar effects to PTSD. So it's really important that we look after each other and look after ourselves. And that's something I talk about a lot as well when I hold talks on horror for children, for example, which is a very delicate thing. And I'm a big fan of introducing scary stories to youngsters. But I will say that there are different age groups that process different things on various levels, which is something that we need to be aware of. But the best way for youngsters to consume it is in literature, because when you read a kid a spooky book, and it can even be a spooky fairy tale, we don't have to go as far as to say you're reading like Friday the 13th, the book for child. Let's not go that far, but it's a spooky kids book. But when you're reading that book, the kid has the chance to say they don't want to hear anymore. The kid has the chance to, read it itself, but then stop reading when it's too much. And even looking at that process, those are early ways of teaching your kid to gain independence for their self and what they can handle and where their boundaries are. And I think we all remember maybe looking at a really creepy VHS cover or book cover, or depending on your age, maybe a Blu-ray cover. I don't know. Goddamn. Looking at a record. but like looking at a creepy picture and then staring at it, finding it uncomfortable, but also fascinating. And that process is something that literature it really lends itself to when it comes to young people. But even as adults, we need to make sure we train ourselves and we're smart about it. And when we recommend horror films to other people, I convert people to horror all the time.
Yes, but you're doing the Lord's work.
I'm doing a dictionary. When they ask me, well, what should I watch? I don't go, what? This is the bloodiest, worst film I've ever seen. Watch it. I ask them, well, what films do you usually watch? These are crossovers of that genre with horror. So you like rom-coms? Well, go watch Warm Bodies. It's like you find the right the right mix. So that's
Yeah.
the one thing to pay attention to. And the other direction you go with psychology and horror is the direction of coping mechanisms. We spoke before this episode of how a lot of people who have anxiety feel drawn to it. There are studies, papers out there, because it's fear in a controlled environment. You know, when it's done, you turn off the TV and you might have some thoughts, but generally the actual threat is gone, and you're experiencing fear in portions, so you can train those coping mechanisms. So, you know, when something does happen, you understand what to do with your body to keep cool. And a lot of films, most films also have rules. It's not as randomly tragic as real life can be. There are rules that you play by, and it's so complicated. It wouldn't be fair for me to try to sum it up in just a few minutes. But yeah, it's really important to read up about it and to have more awareness about what we consume and what we recommend. And a big part of horror is also about seeing the perspective of other people, that foreign perspective. Kind of empathizing with other lives and other people through the medium of horror. So yeah, it's a complex, very fascinating topic.
I think that's you've hit the nail on the head there, really. I mean, that was kind of what formed the basis of this podcast anyway, was to kind of really give a voice to the fact that for a queer audience in particular, there's so much to take from these characters, these archetypes and these tropes of the genre. And I think horror is unique in the way that it does have these kind of rules that are so easily identifiable. And I mean, I've completely never looked at it that way before and thought, oh, well, this is maybe why horror is so comfortable for me, because it's something I recognize and it's familiar. It's funny as well that you say about literature being a way for kids to get into horror, because if I speak personally about how I got into it, as a horror fan and as a horror filmmaker, it was mainly through Goosebumps, and it was those eye-catching covers. It was those stories that you made the stories come alive in your mind at night when you were supposed to be asleep. It was that whole idea of that. It's just magical. Yeah.
And on the subject, big congratulations to R.L. Stine, who this week secured that Disney money. I'm absolutely over the moon, because I feel like R.L. Stine doesn't get the props that they deserve. When it comes to, I've spoken about this before, I really love accessible horror for younger audiences. That's why I really like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I think it's an incredible film. The Goosebumps series, and not a lot of people credit my hero and my idol, but Neil Gaiman to me is a great starting off gateway for young. Like if you read Coraline, that's a brilliant gateway into horror for me. But yeah, I agree with the literature side of things. Especially, I will talk about Neil Gaiman until the day is long. So it's not a Neil Gaiman podcast, but if you are listening by any chance, I love you.
Well, you spoke obviously about rules and things in horror, and obviously, as we said, this whole episode is really a celebration of women in horror, and I think as a genre, it's a very unique one where I think I'd argue women are at the forefront of it, and they have been for decades, and that's what's maybe made the genre stand out. So we wanted to talk about Scream Queens, so not necessarily the final girl or the protagonist in a slasher film that we maybe know and love, but more maybe some strong female characters that have particularly resonated with us. And I believe we've all brought someone to the table that we maybe want to have a bit of a chat about.
But I did bring something to say about Scream Queens that maybe you'll like. Maybe but I'm totally prepared.
That's it. Podcast over. We're done.
Tired. No.
But I don't know, Liam, if you want to kick things off, because I know that you've got a special one that you've been wanting to talk about for a while now. So
yeah, I'd feel ashamed if I didn't mention Kirsty Cotton at all when it comes to talking about female characters in horror films, because I always feel like Kirsty Cotton gets forgotten about quite easily. A lot of people will say that Pinhead's the reason why the Hellraiser franchise is so what it is. I mean, that is part of it. But to me, the person I latched onto was Kirsty, especially in the second film, in the second Hellraiser film. She's like Ripley to me in that film, not to bring up someone else, but like when she dons Julia's skin to then like take on these lords of hell, I was just like, oh, what can she
Queen.
not?
Yes, queen.
She's just incredible. But what I really love about Kirsty as well is she makes mistakes in the film. She's completely human in the mistakes she makes, but ultimately the mistake she makes ends up like saving the day. So it's like she's ultimately flawed, but she's like perfect in her flaw, if that makes any sense at all. And as a big comic book fan, I was really happy when I started to read the Boom Studios continuation of the Hellraiser franchise. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't read them. They really expand on the mythos, and Kirsty becomes the new Pinhead and becomes the new Archduke of Hell. And it works so well. I mean, visually it looks beautiful, but I know that Clive Barker had a lot of input into the comics as well. And just the way that Kirsty becomes like, I mean, just the embodiment of agency to me. She's just 100%. I can't put into words anymore. I prepared all this. I'm just gushing over Kirsty Cotton now.
Why not?
Making Neil Gaiman jealous.
I mean, I will say the Hellraiser films, probably out of the franchises, it's probably one that I'm the least familiar with. And I will say, her character did. I recently rewatched the first one, just I think off the back of one of our episodes. And I know what you mean. The character is a good character to get behind. But is it because what is it about her that you respond to so well?
I was thinking my favorite Disney princess somewhere else is Snow White, and it always has been. And with Snow White, you've got the trope of the wicked stepmother coming in and taking over and ruining everyone's life, and she turns out to be an evil old hag. And Hellraiser's just Snow White with chains, you know what I mean?
A bit of leather and chains.
So I think that's why I really latched onto her when I first watched it, because I could see the parallels there. But I think it's, again, she's really, not to like drive the point home too much, she's like really pure of heart as well. Like that her motivations are ultimately to save her family, which is really beautiful.
A moment of silence on the podcast. What about you, Mariam? Is there any Scream Queen in particular that you identify with, or you find easy to get behind in many ways?
There are lots of Scream Queens that I'm very fond of, and I feel like generally, whether they end up surviving or not, there's something super cool about that person standing up and fighting the evil. One person I like to remind people was a final girl / Scream Queen, but she's gone on to do other things, is Jada Pinkett Smith, who played in Demon Knight. And her character is completely lost, and not to make this about people of color or who are just simply not white, but it's something that is hard to kind of see in the landscape. And Jada Pinkett Smith plays a very, I want to say, tomboyish kind of person, but she's obviously flawless in how she naturally looks, and she's a very committed actress. But seeing her interact with the cast and the very charming demon and everyone else scurrying around and trying to survive, and then she's there and she's just this tiny, dainty, tough cookie. I mean, I'm short. I'm not as dainty as Jada Pinkett Smith, but there's something cool about seeing that little ball of energy just giving this demon a run for his money. And I feel like if I had to name one just to remind people of how awesome she is and how awesome that character was, that would be one that I would probably name. But once Liam B has named his, I would generally like to talk to you guys about the term Scream Queen as well, because that is something we could debate.
Absolutely. I mean, when I came to my choice, I didn't want to necessarily pick a final girl. I mean, I could, I think I said this to you before, Liam, I could talk until forever about Jamie Lee Curtis just in general, but also Laurie Strode, just absolute queen, icon, everything that you could possibly want, I feel, in a strong female lead in a horror film. But I decided to maybe go for a scream queen, and I say that with obviously the finger gesture of Annie Graham in Hereditary, who's played by Toni Collette. And I think the reason I went for that is, one, the film in itself just stands out as probably one of the greatest films I've had the pleasure of being able to experience as it came out and kind of what's happened afterwards. But also, I just think the performance, I mean, we spoke about earlier kind of how horror is maybe a safe place for people to tackle their own mental health issues. I think it's also a genre where we're able to explore stories that even some gritty dramas don't delve into. And I mean, Hereditary packs a punch. You've got this matriarch of this family obviously trying to hold everything together after her mother's died, the loss of her daughter, the loss of everything basically going around her. And yeah, I mean, just performance wise, I just found it impeccable. The fact that she didn't win or even get nominated for like BAFTAs and Oscars is shameful to me. I did look, I think one of the highest accolades she got was a Fangoria Chainsaw Award in 2019, which well deserved.
Absolutely.
But it must have been such a joy for her as an actor to kind of get to play in that sandbox of just emotion and horror and everything. As an audience as well, I found it just insanely good. That for me is why I love some of the characters that we get who are female in horror so much.
That's a great choice. And I also, I think about this a lot, the mainstream recognition, the pop culture recognition of horror, because it's something that is generally debated a lot. I personally, and I'm very open about my theory, I think that that Hollywood is trying to keep horror uncool because the profit margin on horror films is so high compared to other genres.
Absolutely.
And if it ever gets too cool, then too many people will be making horror films and maybe they won't be making as much money off of them. So they're kind of playing it down, but it's almost like this. I mean, it can't be that horror is not recognized for everything it does. And I actually wanted to add this little fun fact when you mentioned Snow White, and I had to double check to make sure I wasn't telling a fib. But Snow White, when it first came out in the 1930s, was actually considered a horror film, and apparently there are certain shots in it that are inspired by Nosferatu and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and other classic horror films as well. So it was also, one of my personal favorites as a child, not knowing. Of course you have to eat her heart. How else will you know she's dead?
This is what I mean when you said about fairy tales being a gateway. I was like, they're some of the most disturbed and effed up stories that you have out there.
Well, that's the thing. When it comes to horror, generally, you're either looking at it for a lesson or you're looking at it for escapism. And sometimes it's a little bit of both. And R.L. Stine, for example, has said in several interviews that he loves the idea of escapism. He doesn't want it to be real. He doesn't want you as a child to have to deal with the fact that maybe your parents are getting a divorce, go to Killer Puppets, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then the fairy tales are like, oh, no, we don't want you to escape. We want you to be even more scared of it.
I think that segues nicely then into maybe talking a bit more about, as you said, debating the term Scream Queen, Final Girl, maybe more of the theory then that is behind some of these tropes and the way in which we're exposed to women in horror. So I don't know, Mariam, if you want to kick things off, I feel like you've probably got a lot more to say than we do, coming from a female perspective as well.
Well, I mean, these are things that I had to have explained to me as well, because I am not a Scream Queen or a Final Girl. I am just a fan who somehow makes money off of it. But I had this conversation with Kelly Maroney. She played in Night of the Comet and Chopping Mall.
Love that film. Love both of those films.
And she's also, not only incredibly beautiful, but she's very smart as well. And I talked to her about it, and she said it's interesting because so a lot of people, even to this day, a lot of actresses don't like those terms, but it has more of a historical context, because she said back in the day, you could make one horror film if you were an actress, maybe two, and you'd still have an acting career.
Yeah.
The moment you were considered a horror actress, no one would book you anymore. That was it. That was the end of your career. And so being called a scream queen or being called a final girl was insulting and a death sentence for, wanting to get work. And she said all the actresses felt that way at the time, but that has completely shifted. And she said the people who gave us those names are not people insulting us anymore. They're fans now. They're people celebrating scream queens and celebrating final girls. And because it comes from a place of love, now the term is one that comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
And it's not as negative as it used to be. Now, I heard this for the first time. It was completely plausible without naming names. I have introduced or interviewed actresses who did not want me to bring up those words in our interview, and they were adamant about it. And I was like, sure, yeah, that's fine. I always prep these interviews and I make sure everyone's comfortable, but some of them were cool. And at some point I just had to ask what's going on? Like, I want to know how to handle this.
Yeah.
When I talk to people, when I'm featuring these people, and that was the explanation I got. So that was pretty cool.
I think that is interesting because I think, I think the term itself has evolved over obviously time. I think, when I think of like scream queens and I think back to maybe like the 80s or even the 70s, it was very much more of an exploitative time for horror, and scream queens you associated with just being like these token characters who were there to be disposed of, and they literally screamed and then died. Whereas now, I don't know, I personally, when I think of the term scream queen, I think more about powerful women in horror, but I suppose that's my perspective of it. I think about strong women. The final girl obviously is a more recent term that was coined, but I know, Liam, you have a few thoughts about that as well, because I know we briefly delved into it in the last episode on Scream, didn't we?
Yeah, I always feel like I'm not the correct answer or the wrong answer. This is just my thoughts. And mine comes from a place of, it kind of sets a rule in horror, where you think of like the slasher genre when it's you have to have a final girl, and then a final girl comes with certain expectations and certain standards to it. And I feel like it's then perceived by fans to be revolutionary that it broke the mold, or it seems to go too far beyond what a final girl is for people to enjoy it. And then I feel like certain films then get overlooked because of that. But also I feel like, and I hate to be like that person, quote unquote, but I feel like we're living in an age now where that term to me doesn't seem as inclusive. And that's why I like queen, because even though queen is a gendered term, it's not fitting. It's like girl isn't as coded as queen is. Yeah. And it's just, so I work with a lot of young teenagers, and luckily we've like had this bond. Like, we bonded from the first time I met them, because a lot of them love horror as well. So I was like, incredible. I know what to talk to them about. And one of them said, oh, I really love slasher films. That's my favorite genre, but I don't like the term final girl. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I use the term quite a lot. And then they were just saying to me, they went, well, growing up, I had the word girl thrown at me all the time. And I feel like that's something I'm never going to be able to aspire to now, because they're the characters that they look up to. And then they were saying, that's why I prefer the term scream queen, because anyone can be royalty.
Eat it up and crown it.
That is incredible. I love that. I'm going to get that printed somewhere.
And that was
such a great quote.
That was a 13-year-old who completely changed and blew my mind that day.
Yeah, consider it. They've just changed mine and my perspective completely. I mean, delving into the theory side of things, obviously the term final girl, it is obviously particularly in slashers, but not exclusively, referring to the last girl or woman who would be alive to confront the antagonist at the end and survive most of the time, but also not guaranteed. Visually then, the film would be told from her perspective. It may initially start that we kind of come at it from the killer, where we're kind of watching these people get offed, and then we shift our perspective over to the final girl. And she is this figure who's resourceful. She knows something's wrong, and she is the one who's going to sort out this problem. It was Carol J. Clover who coined the term then in the book Men, Women and Chainsaws, gender in the modern horror film. And I actually had the pleasure of reading as much as I could while I was at uni of this, because I did my dissertation on gender in horror, but my focus was more on Carrie, because I felt that side of horror was more interesting than maybe the slasher side of things. I felt like it had been done before. But it is interesting to see that obviously this was coined, I believe, way back in the early 90s. It was like 92 or so that we got this term. And when we think like now, the final girl has become meta in itself. We had the likes of Scream and when I think of like Ready or Not, You're Next, these films where we have these expectations, but they're almost kind of the director's given us a nod and a wink to say this is your final girl. So yeah, I find it interesting that the person that you spoke to didn't find it the most inclusive, but I get it completely, and maybe that's why it resonates with queer audiences quite a lot as well, because these characters are usually ostracized in some way, aren't they?
And it's more than just that. I mean, the wording "girl," I think that's where the issue is. But the interesting part about the character of the final girl is that, and as a woman, I can see that for a very long time, female characters were either the lover, the mother, or, you know, the potential victim/victim. Yep. And the final girl character was a character that really didn't need to be female. It was about that will to survive, to take all your knowledge and skill from your entire life and use them to survive. And that's not a gender specific journey to be on or challenge to overcome, which, you know, I find quite interesting. And they always say a lot of these final girls are very tomboyish. They have a father who is in the military, blah, blah, blah. And to me, yeah, the character, I mean, it depends on the film specifically, but that journey is very specific and was kind of, for a long time for girls and women, at least that one character that proved I'm more than just a girl. Like I can fight back. I'm being underestimated. But these days, obviously, people are experimenting a lot more with roles for all genders and gender identities. Still, you know, women are not quite where they need to be yet. That said, you know, now the LGBTQ plus community needs to have more representation. That's something that's on the rise. So, you know, maybe the term is outdated or should be used ironically, perhaps. But that character, that journey, that is very inclusive, in my opinion.
I will say, I spoke a lot in the last episode about one of my favorite final girls, Scream Queens, just being Gale Weathers. And I feel like when Gale Weathers came along, it kind of flipped everything on its head once again. I won't go too much into it and tread old water, but the fact is, Gale at the time was this character who wasn't apologetic about being the quote unquote bitch. She wasn't scared to be headstrong. She wasn't scared to be disliked. She ultimately had heart, but she wasn't villainized for her ambition, which I could, listen to the Scream episode if you want to hear more on that.
No, but it's a very interesting phenomenon because generally women in films in general, not just horror, being villainized is something that happened post-war, because whilst their men were away, women had to become more independent. And when they came back and suddenly these men saw their independent, strong women who really didn't necessarily need them anymore, that was terrifying. And so that was processed in media at the time through femme fatales, you know, who were you know, strong and sexy, dangerous. I mean, yes. what's your point? But for a very long time, that's how it was portrayed. You know, if you are smart and independent and strong, then you're bad. Because even the final girls who started before this demonization of the strong woman, final girls started before that movement ended, and the only way we could allow it was because they were generally mousy beforehand. Only in recent years have we seen mouthy, slutty people who are still decent people and survive in the horror films.
Absolutely.
That used to not be the case. Oh, you're a slut? You're going to die now. Now it's like, oh, you're a slut? Tell me a joke and kill this demon for us, please.
That's the soundbite for this episode. Absolutely. Love that.
But yes, it's a huge shift. It's a huge shift.
We obviously touched upon all the aspects of horror other than the final girl, but I think, you either basically being female in a horror movie, maybe prior to the late 70s, 80s, you were monstrous. And if it was, if I don't know, the films that were about women, when they entered womanhood, this is where this monstrosity was unleashed. And like you said, there was this overlap where then slasher films began. But it is curious to think that, I don't know, we have to see these characters go on this journey and almost be purged of all of these characteristics that a male-dominated audience might find unruly or not pleasant, in order to then survive this ordeal. And they have to be, I mean, they're held to standards that, I mean, I think that's why it maybe has evolved, is by today's standards and obviously society, we have different ideas, obviously, sexual freedom, liberation, everything. These are all topics that I'm glad that we are talking about. But I think that's obviously reflected in horror as well. So I don't know, it throws up a lot of interesting questions as to why. I think on one side I see it as a very positive thing that we have these strong women in horror, and I think coming from a queer perspective, I've always identified with that. But on the flip side of that, I find it very, very curious that we have to put these women through so much in order to get the conclusion that we're so familiar with.
Well, I do think that we're slowly getting to a place where the focus is on the character and the story of a person doesn't need to be tied to their gender. Not because we are a man do we want to react like this. Not because we are a woman do we need to react like that. People always complain of how, for a revenge film, it takes, John Wick losing his dog, but it'll take another character hours of sexual abuse to want the same sort of revenge. And
absolutely,
and that's something that we've had a lot in the past and still have now. But I do think that the big reason why we're shifting in a new direction, and I'm going to take you on like a whole chain of events, technology has made it possible for films to be made by people who are not tied to huge studios. That means we have a lot more independent filmmaking, especially when it comes to the horror genre, because in horror, the storytelling is always the core. It's not the pyrotechniques or the CGI or the actor with the big name. It's the story. And as long as you have independent content creators, they can come up with something that's relevant now to them, to society, and they can pull in their friends and pull in their resources, and they can make that film now. And because of that, you have more genuine, raw, unique stories that are very specific and leave that cookie cutter model because they don't care about the risk. And with that being the case at the moment, and also moving forward, we're going to see, in my opinion, more stories like that. And anyone who's listening, I encourage, if you're a content creator, if you're a creative, go and do something, write your story, whatever that may be. Because in horror, if it means something to you, it means something to the community. And we will feel the difference. We will feel if it's heartfelt or not. So we're not quite there yet, but I think we're on the best track of creating an even playing field for all genders.
I just want to say, honestly, I could just listen to you talk for hours. That was honestly incredible.
I
was getting chills then when you were saying that. I was just like, geez. But no, I think you're absolutely right. I think the more that the system is broken, the more progress we'll see. And I'm excited to see where horror goes ultimately. But not to just celebrate, obviously, the women on screen. I think there's a lot happening behind the scenes. There's a lot of female directors I'm keeping my eye on and I'm inspired by.
I can tell you that. So occasionally I do panels on women in horror and female icons in horror. And a few years ago in preparation, I found a statistic by the Gina Davis Institute that when it comes to dialogue distribution, horror has about 52 to 53% female dialogue and the rest male. And it was, at the time at least, the only genre where females carried a majority of the dialogue on screen. In no other genre was that the case. And when it comes to the audience, I mean, if any of you have been to horror film festivals, it is very distributed. It is not, I mean, obviously, I guess it depends on the event, but the ones I go to, they're very even. And I once did a panel in Liverpool in cooperation with the Liverpool Horror Club on women in horror. And on this panel, I had a woman who managed horror-themed bands. I had someone who worked in film distribution. I had an actress and I had a director. And then we had clips from people who are somewhere else in the world and then replied to certain answers in an interview beforehand. And so the spin on that event was I only got sponsors from the tech industry and some independent female entrepreneurs to do goodie bags, but got a lot of tech sponsors. And I got them because I went there, I showed them these statistics, and I said, horror does a really good job. And this is the genre where allegedly women are supposed to be half naked and stabbed down in every single film. And that is not the case sometimes. No. Because sometimes that's what we want to see, but not always.
Absolutely.
And the tech industry has an issue with gender distribution. So you sponsor us, and you will not be disappointed. And they found that compelling enough, and they all sponsored everyone I had a sit down with, and we completely sold out. We had several hundred people at the event, and it was a very open dialogue about what's going well, what's going not well, how we could translate that to other industries. And then in the end, something I asked, because obviously we're always very focused on the actors and the directors, but it takes a village to make a film.
100%.
I asked, look, you've got like tech people in the audience. What tech should they be inventing to help with gender equality? And they had come up with different ideas, like different platforms or how to market things. One of the things that I threw into the mix was, cameras should be lighter. I know a lot of women who wanted to become DPs, but before you can be a DP, you need to be a camera operator. And that equipment is heavy.
Yes.
So they had to give up and became photographers instead because the technology was just more than they could handle. And you don't think about these things, but it influences the playing field. So we'll have to see where that goes. But yeah, open dialogues I think are the way to go.
I mean, even you just mentioning stuff like that, it's stuff as a male filmmaker I just completely would overlook somewhat.
If you don't mind me interjecting really quickly.
By all means.
So I haven't really mentioned this on the podcast before, but I'm a huge comic book fan, have been since a very young age, and horror comics have never really been my thing. I'm too much of an X-Men person because obviously I'm gay.
Hi, gay.
And I've been really getting into some horror comics lately, and it's really great. I was reading an article where there's a big shift in horror comics at the moment too, where a lot of more female creatives are getting a look in where it's never been done before. It has, but it's not to the extent it is now. But on the off chance that Marjorie Liu isn't listening to this, Marjorie Liu creates this comic called Monstrous. I highly recommend to anyone out there. Marjorie Liu is just a fantastic comic book author. A little bit of everything. She is incredible. Speaking of comics as well, I also think that comics often get overlooked when we're talking about the horror genre. I read a lot, not just books, but I'll give myself a couple of hours a week to read some comics just in general. And it made me think of my favorite crossover from the superhero genre and when the horror genre it's Uncanny X-Men 143. And it's a very early story about Kitty Pryde being stuck in the X-Mansion, being chased by an Ngari demon. And it's very much in the style of Alien. Obviously, Kitty was the inspiration for many other final girl and scream queens from then on out. But if anybody wants to read a really good comic book that kind of like has that final girl element to it, it's Uncanny X-Men 143. It's just incredible.
Fantastic tip. I'm also looking at, because you mentioned it, Monstrous, and the artwork is
stunning. Yeah,
breathtaking. Goodness, Marjorie, well done. Look at you go.
While we're still on the subject of women in horror, then, as I said before you guys jumped on the episode, we're going to have a bit of fun on this episode as well. While we're talking about Scream Queens, I want to test your knowledge as to whether or not you can identify the Scream Queen purely from the sound of their lungs. So,
no.
I'm going to play you. I have, I believe, 10 sound clips. Very short, don't worry. And I have a bonus one just in case you guys are tired, but I think I might play it anyway.
Okay.
I'll give you a point for the person's name, so the character's name, and obviously a point for the film if you can identify the two.
Like, this is a real game.
Ooh. So, without further ado, the Scream Queen quiz will begin. Here is soundbite number 1.
Ooh, it had a little something on the end.
Do we want to hear this one again? Or are we ready to give an answer, do we think?
I think maybe one more time,
again,
just to be on the safe side, yeah.
Okay, and for those playing at home as well, I will give you the answers at the end, but play along. Now, I don't know if Mariam's getting outside help here or if I saw her take the headphones off, but I feel like she's trying to get someone in on this.
Of course not. Well, it was confusing to me because the first time I heard it, I heard like a crunch, which made me think, well, maybe it's an animal of sorts.
Yeah.
But then it sounded like more like wood or something. So maybe it is just the space and no animal. I don't know. Liam, what did you hear?
I literally, the first time around, I was like, oh, it sounds like a wolf something. And then second time around, I was like, is that Jamie Lee Curtis in the closet in Halloween?
Yeah, I was going to say Jamie Lee Curtis. Yeah.
Okay, so what are your answers, guys?
It's Laurie Strode in the first Halloween film.
Same.
Well done. You get 2 points each, guys. It is indeed. You've got one, Mariam. We're on to a good start
here.
I'm
probably going to get. I wasted it.
Amazing. Right, okay. Scream number 2. Here we go. I will say probably one of the greatest screams in horror history right there, but yeah, she goes on a bit. She's got some lungs.
Wow. And the thunder kind of threw me off.
Yeah, the thunder. Well, but it's a hinge. Otherwise, it would have just been a scream. So I'm trying to think what ends with like a storm.
I feel like I've heard this scream recently as well. Right, just because it may be no. My default answer, Kirsty Cotton, Hellraiser.
Okay, that's your answer, Liam. What about you, Mariam?
I was gonna say I don't know the name of the character, but Friday the 13th.
Okay, unfortunately, both are incorrect. It's actually Casey Becker's mother in the opening of Scream. She sees Drew Barrymore hung up in the tray, and she just belts that scream out for us.
I have heard that recently.
You have, yeah. It was literally last episode, Liam. So you're doing terrible here. Okay, Scream number 3. This one might be a little easier. If you listen, you might have a clue in there. Okay, here we go. Okay, we saw a flurry of activity there. I think Mariam might have an answer for this one, so I'm going to come to you first.
Was it The Shining?
And do you know the character's name?
God damn it. Her name is Liam knows her name. Sorry,
We'll split this one.
Wendy.
Is it Wendy Torrance?
Is it Wendy?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall.
I'll give that to both of you. You're
Hi.
currently tying, guys. You see, you're doing well so far. I think this one might throw you. Personally, I find this one quite hilarious to listen to. So here we go. Scream number 4.
I'm happy I got 2 right. If I get none other right from this point on, I feel like I've still defended my honor.
Exactly. You've not done terribly. I'm not going to get an email from your agent saying that I need to cut this section of the podcast afterwards.
Cut it all.
Here's Scream number 4. It goes on a bit. I do apologise, but I think you both have an idea. I think
Midnight. No, it's Midsummer.
It is indeed. And do we know the character's name? Did you say?
A bunch of women.
Nope.
Her name is a bunch of women.
Her name is a bunch of
Correct.
women.
Points for both of us. I can't remember her name. No, I'm terrible with names. I'm glad
Florence Pugh.
It
That's
is
another.
Florence Pugh, but her name is Danny. In this, so I will give you both 1 point. I'm going to be.
I will say, I feel like that's something we should all do together at some point. Like, I really like the idea of having us just getting into a room and having a communal.
Well, we said horror and well-being. Let's just collectively just scream together. Amazing.
Let's do it.
Right. Okay. Number 5. Here we go. Okay, Mariam, you've got a smile on your face.
I think it's the Wizard of Oz. Is it? Is it the Wizard of Oz?
And the character?
The
Wicked Witch of the West.
Wicked Witches of the West. Yeah, that was.
Well done. Well done.
What a weird one.
At first, I knew what it was, but I was like, no, it can't be because we're not. It won't be that. Like, why would it be that? But then we're a gay podcast, so why wouldn't it be the Wizard of Oz?
Exactly. Friends of Dorothy right here. So it is the Wicked Witch of the West.
So many times I was like, oh my God, this is my spirit animal. All right, here we go.
You are looking a bit green today, yeah.
I'm on fire.
This is it. I had to cut out the bit where she literally goes, I'm melting, because I was like, you're going to get that straight away. But well done. Okay. This one is a fun one.
Help me! Help me! Hurry! Help me! Hurry up, you wimp!
I have no idea what that is. What is that?
Do you have an idea, Liam?
Is it Death Becomes Her?
And do you know the character's name?
No. Madeline Ashton.
Madeline Ashton. You've pulled ahead, Liam. I feel like you're going to be tying otherwise, so I'll get you guys to buzz in, I think, from here.
I have to watch that film again soon. I spoke about it with someone recently, but it's been years. And yeah, it's going to be my weekend entertainment now.
Oh, yes, 100% yes. We need a whole episode on it, don't we, Liam? Because just incredible.
We do, yes.
Right, number 7. I think you both might have a good chance of getting this one. So the first person to buzz in, raise hands, do whatever, I'll come to you. Here we go. I'm so sorry, that was quite loud. Mariam's bleeding from the ears. Liam, I think you raised your hand. You raised your hand again.
It may be wrong. Was that Ellen Ripley?
It was indeed. Do you know which film it was from?
Aliens.
Yes, you've got both points. Well done.
Like, good for you, man. No,
okay, this one again. I think it's a short one. It'll be fairly fast. If you know it, you'll know it. Okay, so fingers on buzzers, even though you don't have buzzers. Here we go.
Are you a god?
Liam again?
Ghostbusters. Oh my god. It's not Zool. It's Gozer the Gozerian.
Well done. Nicely done. Okay, you're kicking ass, Liam.
I'm taking names.
Okay, this is number 9. Here we go. Okay, Liam again.
That was Janet Weiss screaming at seeing Dr. Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
It was indeed. Well done. Well done.
That one I recognized too, but I was too slow. And funnily enough, I only saw it for the first time 2 years ago at a drive-in movie theater.
Oh wow!
What a way to experience it!
I
That's
know.
incredible.
And what was crazy was that so it was during the pandemic, and it was for a lot of people the first time since the pandemic that they had gone to the movies, but it was a drive-in. So for example, when there was a light, no one could take out their lighters, they were in their cars, everyone started flashing their cars. And it was just everyone was dressed up and then in their cars, and then they pulled down the windows and they were showing their costumes. So
wow.
It was
That
really
sounds
cool.
magic. I mean, that film alone, the things it does for people is
That
just
film
incredible.
made me who I am today.
Okay.
He literally has fishnet tights on below camera. You just can't see them.
He
That's
loves like shadow play in his bedroom in front of the curtain. It's just so date's going well. Let me show you my bed.
amazing. Okay, so we are at number 10. Buzz in if you think you know the answer. It's a short one. I'm not giving you too much.
Psycho.
Okay,
No.
Mariam's gone in with Psycho.
yeah.
Oh, well, if you want to change, you can change.
No, it's not like my other guess is going to be any better.
What's your other guess?
I don't know. Give me a moment. No, it's fine. It's fine. Liam.
I mean, I'm probably wrong. Is it The Bride of Frankenstein?
Liam's got it right. It is the bride from the Bride of Frankenstein. How the
That's
bloody
crazy.
hell did you get that?
I love her.
That's crazy.
She made me who I am today.
I have some greys coming through, so yeah.
Right, here's the bonus one. Now, I'm going to say, if anyone gets this, then I'm going to say that maybe this is the one that takes the win. I want to spice things up a little bit, okay? So this is a bonus clip. The only clue I'm going to give you is bear in mind that this is a queer horror podcast, okay? So, without further ado, here is the bonus clip.
Don't have a cow. The guys are meeting us here.
Love that clip. I have no idea what it is. But I love that clip. Don't have a cow.
Don't have a
Guys are
cow,
meeting.
Heather.
Is that? No, it's not. Is that from the? Is that Adore Delano saying something to? Is it Gia Gunn from the horror episode of Drag Race?
It is indeed, Liam. I don't know how. But you've exceeded expectations on this one.
That's
Jeez.
amazing. I have pure respect for you. You have done
You know
so
your
well.
Scream Queens. That's what we've established. I do apologise, Mariam. You've been a wonderful guest, but you did not win the Scream Queen quiz. Liam, you really did take that home, so well done. I think it shows you probably need to maybe
I
do something else.
that your social media gets a photo of him in some sort of like Scream Queen victory outfit. Is there any way you could put one up and
I could just
tag
maybe
me in it?
Photoshop you on with I feel like you need a sash. Maybe
Mhm.
Sarah
Don't give
Michelle
away your
Gellar
concept.
just
Yes.
with your
Surprise
face.
Surprise
Absolutely.
your audience. I insist. We need to have the official Scream Queen title, and I can send you my sad face, and you can Photoshop me as like the Igor to his Dr. Frankenstein.
I'll just put you like
bowing
crouched in the background, yeah, and then
respectfully.
Perfect, absolutely
My
perfect,
face
nailed
on
it.
on a table next to him or something. On some object in the room.
Well, speaking of
Fiend
horror
bag.
stories, because that was pretty horrific, I usually, obviously on the podcast, Liam usually gives us a dramatic reading of a horror story, usually associated with the dating apps, predominantly Grindr, because it is an awful place to be sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But Mariam, I hear that you're happy to take the floor on this episode and maybe expose us to some true horrors you've experienced.
So it is semi-correct because I experienced the telling of the story from someone.
Okay. I love a good campfire story.
Dim those lights.
I have lots of stories, so next time I'll just have to tell another one, but
Incredible.
I have one for today.
Happy for this.
And I can't remember if I put it on the Grim Exchange, so I don't know if Liam knows it or not. but if not, then buckle up, and I don't know how you edit these, but add some spooky music. Once upon a time, a few years ago, I was sitting on a plane on the way to Manchester from Germany. And it was a very long day. I was held up by security because I had salami in my bag and a broken octopus. It's a whole thing, and a bunch of cables because I have my interface with me. Security didn't like it. Anyway, so I almost missed my flight. I sat down. I could see your faces.
I'm sorry, I'm still not past the salami in the bag.
Well, the salami plays an important role because that salami is what got me this story.
Okay. Oh God, I can only begin to think where this is going to go.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I sat down on the plane. I had my seat. Next to me, there was a seat free. And then the seat next to that was a gentleman. Now, I hadn't yet eaten my salami. I'm sorry, it's going to get way more serious in just a minute. But this is the
game face.
Salami, but it was more like a smoked tartare, so it was kind of wrong.
Incredible.
Okay. So I said, "Excuse me, sir. I have this meat that I want to eat, and I want to make sure you're not vegan. I don't want to upset you by eating this smoked tartare next to you on a plane because there's no window we can open, and I didn't want to upset him." And he laughed at me, surprisingly, and he said, "Yeah, it's fine. Thank you for asking, but go for it, eat it." So we got to talking, and I told him that I work in the horror industry, and the moment you tell someone that you work with spooky things, a lot of people, if not most, tend to have at least one weird story. And you can tell it's a story they usually only share either when they're drunk or if they're talking to someone they know wants to listen. And I obviously wanted to listen. So this is that man's story. So this gentleman told me that he generally didn't believe in ghosts or any kind of supernatural phenomenon, and this one occurrence was the one thing that kind of shook him and made him question, well, what is really possible and what's really out there? He told me that when he was growing up, his grandfather passed away when he was very young, and because it was very painful for the family, it wasn't something they spoke about very much. Now, his grandmother and his grandfather were very close friends to another couple. They used to have a card-playing group that met on a regular basis. And as time passed, eventually he was in his early 20s, and the husband of this befriended couple passed away. So because they were so close, his family was also at the funeral of the couple's family, of the gentleman's family. And his grandmother, this was a lifelong friend of hers, she was extremely upset, and she drank a lot of alcohol that night. So did he, and he said that in the state they were in, they had the most open conversation he had ever had with his grandmother before. He was a young man, young adult. They were both drunk. They were both in this very vulnerable, honest place, and they were just talking about everything. So he considered this to be the moment to finally ask his grandmother about how his grandfather passed. And he said, how did he die? No one ever really explained it to me. And she said it was very, very tragic. He was standing in the kitchen, making a sandwich, and suddenly he just falls over. His head hits the edge of the counter, boom, lands on the floor, and he's dead. And he thought that was very upsetting, but he thanked her for opening up about it, and it was what it was. 9 months passed and suddenly his grandmother passes away, and weirdly enough, the exact same way. She's making a sandwich in her kitchen. She suddenly falls over, head hits the edge of the counter, and she hits the ground dead. So he's standing with his parents and he says, how weird is that grandma died the exact same way as grandpa did? And they say, well, what are you talking about? And he's like, the kitchen, the sandwich, the counter, it's really the exact same story. And his parents said, well, you were too young to remember, but your grandfather was very sick and died in the hospital. And it was then that he realized that his grandmother foresaw her own death 9 months prior.
Oh my lord, I've just got chills. No.
There you go. Stick that into your pipe and smoke it with a salami.
I mean, I was expecting the plot twist to be that they were making a salami sandwich. I think that would have just been the nail in the coffin, yeah.
Smoked tartar, bitches.
That is absolutely terrifying. I think you've exceeded my expectations on how chilling that actually would be. So thank you.
Oh. Anytime, man.
God, things like that. I mean, we just posted on our Instagram today about whether or not people believe in the supernatural, and I don't know. We've had like a ton of messages of people actually saying like legit things that have happened to them, and it's a scary place, guys. It's a scary, scary place out there.
But I mean, are ghosts really scarier than like people? I don't know.
I mean, I suppose it depends on how they were when they were alive. I mean,
I can't wait to be a ghost.
You're going to be a fabulous ghost. I can tell.
I'm going to be.
You'll be like Jimbo the drag clown, won't you?
I will remember you.
I'm gonna be like Carrington from Casper the Friendly Ghost, just this chain smoking evil old hag who just insults people. I want to be that ghost who like somebody's in the mirror and I just pop out and be like, "You've got split ends," and then just go.
I love that. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. I'm probably not going to sleep too well tonight, but thank you. Much appreciated. I mean, the only other thing that I can think of to say, Liam, is I know that we also mentioned maybe that you did have a book recommendation for this month.
Yes.
That you possibly wanted to mention before we wrap things up.
Yeah, so for anybody following the Super Freak Media socials, you'll see that we started our little book club, which is basically the same thing as I do on this podcast, is I tell you a book to read every month and you go and read it. But it's a little bit more in depth and I go into why I think you should read it. This month is a fantastic book called Clown in a Cornfield by Adam. Now, forgive me, it's either Caesar or Cesare. And I
prefer Cesare. Yeah. That sounds very opulent.
Why not both? Caesar Cesare.
But it's it's an incredible like throwback. It's like a nostalgic feeling slasher, but also very modern. It tiptoes both lines very well. And again, as always, I completely judged a book by its cover. The cover art to it is absolutely stunning, and it reminds me of those old like 80s horror books. It's got like this. Just this beautiful color palette. But it includes an incredible final girl / scream queen in there. It features twists and turns that I never expected to happen. It does feature a clown and it does feature a cornfield. So pretty much
it delivers what it promises. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a sequel in the works as well, due to come out this year. And I'm really excited because when I finished this, I was like sitting there stunned for a few moments because I haven't enjoyed a book this much in a while. I mean, I enjoy most books that I read, but like this book for me is like surpassed anything I've read in like the last 5 years. It's so good.
Okay.
And
take a note of that too.
Yeah, features a very high body count, which I wasn't expecting because it was when I went on Goodreads, it was actually marketed as a young adult horror novel, and nothing about it to me screams young adult. When I think of young adult, I think of things like Percy Jackson, and it was it was nothing of the sort.
Amazing. This is actually a book that I've also ordered and is on the way, so I might actually have read it and have some thoughts by next podcast, as opposed to me just going, "Yeah, that sounds great, mate. That sounds awesome." Yeah.
So basically, what I'm saying right now, that sounds good, man.
Yeah, you're being me on this podcast episode, Mariam. That's
and also. Just for anybody out there who does like just the topic of the podcast this month is Final Girls and Scream Queens. And there are some fantastic books out there, both non-fiction and fiction. Most recently, there's a great book by Grady Hendrix called The Final Girl Support Club. It's full of Easter eggs to, the Scream Queens on screen that we know and love. But also tells a really, really compelling story about trauma and PTSD, not to sound like Jamie Lee Curtis, but yeah.
Trauma.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. And there's also a great non-fiction book that explores the trope of the final girl, which has completely gone out of my head now, and I wrote it down, but I can't find my notes. So.
I thought you were going to also maybe recommend Kelly Rowland's autobiography.
Funny you should say that, because when we are talking about Final Girls, she does get overlooked. I mean, not many Scream Queens can turn around and tell, this horrible, evil killer, you're wearing a f***y Christmas sweater. Like, that to me, I mean, she's the ultimate Scream Queen just for that. And shout out to like Kelly Rowland adjacent. Michelle Williams just been a Mass on the Mass singer, so way
amazing. Nice segue there. Nice segue. Do you have any recommendations? Putting you on the spot a bit, Mariam, but anything that's kind of caught your eye in the last month, horror wise, that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Well, I only just started, but I guess if you want to ask, I just started because I just bought the book Clown in a Cornfield because it sounded so cool that I just bought it so I don't forget it. So once I write it, I'll let you know. But I've just started a book called Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. And basically it's a collection of questions that are somehow related to death, and then the person researched the answers to those questions. Questions like, will my cat eat my eyeball? So it's non-fiction, but I do think that if you're a horror fan and you're kind of interested in more morbid stuff, this is a fun read.
It's the sort of factoids I think I need the answers to be honest. So I'm definitely going to have to check that out. Yeah. Did you know your cat won't eat your eyeballs? Yeah.
I mean, I think they will though.
Yeah. Oh my god, plot twist.
I'm looking at my cat right now and she's nodding.
Or is it, I was going to say, or is your cat looking at you? That's what you need to ask.
I'm going to spice your eyeballs. You got it.
Licking her lips and she's got a knife and fork.
Like, meow. That pussy.
Well, this podcast went in a direction I did not think we'd go, the best direction. But I just want to say, wrapping things up, a massive thank you, Mariam, for joining us on the podcast this month. It's always amazing to catch up with you. You're an absolute dream, and good luck, obviously, with everything that you've been telling us about. Where can people find you? Where can people find what you're up to? This is your moment to plug away. Tell our viewers.
Finally. Okay, everyone, listen up. Take out your pencils and paper because I am I think the best platform would be Instagram. I'm lady_Mariam_Michael, and Mariam is written like Maria with a second M, so not Miriam and not Marion. It's Mariam. So lady_Mariam_Michael, and you can see a whole bunch of pictures of me or the horror stuff. I recently posted a picture of my my Ouija cutting board with a selection of cheeses, and I think fruit was on that.
Is that a salami on there as well? I can see.
It is a salami. So yeah,
cheese salami and the occult. I mean, what can better that?
We were joking that when I cut it, I might accidentally call some sort of like tapas demon or something. But,
yeah.
I think I might be possessed because I freaking love tapas. But no, cheesy jokes aside, it's fantastic. So if you want to see a little bit of how I live and what I'm working on, it's always good to just look at my Instagram and kind of see what's up.
Awesome sauce. Well, I already follow you, and obviously I love seeing what you're up to, and I can't wait to see what's next for you. I know that there's a lot on the way, so keep your eyes peeled, folks. And I guess there's not really much else left to say other than happy Women in Horror Month.
Happy Horror Month.
And happy LGBT plus History Month for those who are celebrating in the UK.
Indeed. It's this month is packed out. There's a lot to celebrate and commemorate, and it's Black History Month as well, isn't it? In the
US.
In the US, that's correct.
Yes, lots to celebrate and be thankful for. Next month, we're going to be jumping on the Buffy bandwagon because it's going to be 25 years since Miss Summers slayed her way onto our screens. So I can't wait to discuss that, discuss everything to do with Sunnydale.
Pre-warning to everyone, I have a lot of thoughts. This show meant a lot to me, still does, and just strap yourselves in because you might be here for a while on that one.
3-hour special.
If you ever do a Charmed episode, you can get me back on because that's something I would definitely want to chat about.
Yes. Okay.
Please.
Deal. We've again another contract just made on the podcast. Amazing.
Crap, another oral contract.
No backing out now. No backing out. But yes, we will be back again next month. Thank you so much as always for the support on this podcast. And if it's okay, I'm going to hand it over to Mariam to sign us off today.
Well, guys, I'm Lady Mariam, and thank you for listening to the They're Queer podcast. Closets were not made for people; they were made for monsters and babysitter killers. Take care, y'all.
Podcast on the superfreakmedia podcast network. To show your support, be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And you can find us on social media in the links in the description of this episode. Thank you for listening.